The movie opens up with a narrator telling us the story of a boy named Harold, a little boy with a magic purple crayon that could draw whatever he wanted, and it would come to life. He was a fast thinker and would always use his magic drawing abilities to get himself out of tight situations. As a loner, Harold drew himself friends, Moose and Porcupine, and ever since then, they have always been close to each other. Just as Harold becomes an adult, his world becomes bigger and his imagination begins to expand. He spends all this free time having fun with Moose and Porcupine because, with his purple crayon, anything is possible. One day, when Harold questions his existence, wanting to find out who drew him, the narrator reveals that he created him, and they look just alike, although he's getting older now. The old man continues by saying Harold can't see him because he is in the real world where things are so much complicated. Harold is curious to know more about this world, which he feels is amazing. However, the narrator doesn't say much else before leaving Harold. Harold isn't satisfied as he begins to reflect on a dozen questions concerning the real world. When the old man seems to no longer pay attention to him, Harold decides to set out to find the real world himself. He believes with his magic crayon anything is possible, so he uses his crayon to draw a door that creates a portal to the real world. They are all amazed and proceed to go through. However, Moose is hesitant because he feels the old man warned them about the real world as it is said to be complicated. Harold tells them to stay in case the old man comes back, and then he jumps into the portal where he is instantly transformed from a drawing to a human. Harold is amazed by the colorful view and how everything is in 3 dimensions. But then the people passing by see him as a weirdo. Meanwhile, Porcupine tricks Moose into having a peek at the real world till she uses her quills to push him through, but then gets locked behind. Moose turns into a human as soon as he gets into the real world, while Harold notices that they don't relate with him because of his clothes, so he goes over to get a change of clothes, just like real people. After Harold takes a moment to enjoy how beautiful the real world is, he spots an elderly man and then assumes he is the old man from his world. As he runs towards him, he meets up with Moose, and together they go over to meet their supposed creator. Well, the old man scares Harold and Moose off. Moose quickly realizes that it is a wrong identity and that the real world could be more diverse than they expected. They decide to continue searching for the old man as Harold draws a bike and brings it to life. On the other hand, Porcupine manages to open the portal as she goes through herself. Just like the others, she is transformed into a human and becomes openly excited to finally have thumbs. Just as Harold rides his bike carelessly on the road, they are distracted as they almost hit a mother, Terry, and her son Mel. She manages to swerve quickly as Moose transforms into a donkey for some reason. Terry quickly comes down to check if they were being hit by her car. She is surprised not to see the Moose anymore, as he has changed back to a human. While she attends to their little injuries, Terry notices that she has a flat tire, but Harold draws a spare tire for Terry when she doesn't notice. Mel is left in shock as he quickly interacts with the strangers. This prompts Terry to offer to drop Harold and Moose at their destination. Meanwhile, Porcupine gets to see the same old man Moose and Harold had encountered earlier. He chases her away too, wondering what kind of weird day he's having. On the other hand, while Terry drives to drop Harold and Moose off, Mel is able to convince her to let them stay at their house as they do not have a place to stay that night, and they are still not able to locate the old man they had come after. When they get to the house, Terry takes them to where they would sleep for the night. They are ecstatic as they browse through her stuffs. Harold discovers that she is a musician, but she tells him that it was her childhood dream, but then reality sets in and how she works at a store. Moose tries to let Harold know that the real world is completely different from theirs and they don't actually fit in. Harold tells him to take the whole experience as an adventure while they try to find the old man to give them a narration of the world, and they would finally return home. Meanwhile, the elderly man reports to the police all the weird occurrences that happened to him today, but they don't believe him as they find him to be mentally unstable. Later that night, just as Moose sleeps, Harold gets to have a conversation with Mel overnight. Mel shows Harold his drawings as he talks about his imaginary pet Carl. Mel goes on to tell him about the tragic demise of his father and how his mom hasn't really been herself since his death. He promises to help find the old man if Harold can help make his mom happy again. Just then, Harold shows him how he was able to bring out the tire using his magic crayon. He lets Mel draw with the crayon, bringing to life a spider fly. Porcupine goes on looking for Harold. She comes across a house with purple flowers, thinking that Harold is leaving her some clues. She ends up breaking into the house and makes herself comfortable by eating their cake before the alarms go off. The house owner threatens her to leave as he had called the cops already. The next day, Terry wakes up to see dozens of pies on the dinner table. She goes outside to meet Harold, Moose, and her son sharing a moment. Mel tries to make Terry see that Harold could do magic, but she seems tired of the whole situation as she asks them to leave, saying her hospitality has expired as she has to go to work. Before Harold leaves, he breaks his magic crayon and then gives half to Mel. Mel decides to follow them in search of their old man by taking a long route to school. Just then, Harold comes across another old man. As he rushes to meet him, the old man attacks him. Moose realizes that they need to come up with a better plan if they are to find the old man. Harold comes across an article that reads the place to come look for answers. So Mel decides to take them to the library to help find their old man. When they got to the library, they find Gary Nastwick, a failed fantasy writer, having a reading session with people who aren't really interested in what he was reading. He is trying to sell off his own 700-page book with a world that is too complicated and a title that is kind of hard to pronounce. Gary meets up with Mel, who introduces him to his new friends, Harold and Moose. Harold finds out that Gary has a crush on Terry and refers to her as the Warrior Queen. He bases the love interest of his book on her and tries to hide it from Mel. When Gary refuses to help them, Mel tries to use his mother to get in to assist Harold. He promises to help, but only because of Terry. They go on an endless search for old men around the globe but couldn't find anything. Harold then suggests that they try and find the old man. Probably he would be able to notice them if they fly up a sign in the sky. Harold, Moose, and Mel leave to go plot their next move as Harold used his crayon to draw up a plane. When Gary sees this, he gets to find out where Harold has come from. Meanwhile, Harold flies with Moose and Mel through the skies until Moose morphs again and causes them to abandon the plane and parachute back down to Mel's school. They leave a message and a number in the sky, asking the old man to call them. Just then, Terry's phone begins to explode with phone calls as the number on the sky actually belongs to her. Mel goes to school, and while he tries to sneak in, he is stopped by two bullies. When they try to steal his whistle, the one he wears around his neck for Carl, his imaginary pet, he elbows one of the bullies in the face, giving him a bloody nose. One of the teachers intervenes and then sends him to the principal's office. Harold and Moose go over to Ollie's, where Terry works. They are amazed by how big the store is as they go through the items. Meanwhile, Terry's manager notices that she has been taking personal calls and then tells her to be focused or else she might lose her job. Just then she sees Harold and Moose at the retail store. She tries to find out why old people have been calling her and then realizes that Harold and Moose are the masterminds behind the whole buzzing phone calls. She gets another phone call, but this time from the school principal, telling her that Mel got into trouble. When Terry needs to go to the school for Mel, the two offer to help work her job, so Terry tells them all they need to know about the job. 6 minutes into the retail job, Harold and Moose are exhausted as they question the whole idea of working. Meanwhile, Terry goes to get Mel from school. She tells him that he needs to let go of Carl and start making real friends. Although Mel tries to make her see that he is friends with Harold. Terry doesn't like the idea of it as Harold will fill Mel's head with magic conspiracies. Harold and Moose go over to the main store as they got bored so fast from working. Unfortunately, they set the store on fire as Terry returns with Mel. We get to find out that Harold had used a crayon to draw a live puma after a customer had come to get the shoe brand. Terry is fired, and she decides to cut Harold off, but Mel talks her into letting them stay for a while. After a little contemplation, she decides to let them stay as she admits that she really did hate her job. Terry joins the three as they walk through town. When they get to the town square, we learn that Terry had stopped playing the piano or doing anything music-related since her husband died. Harold decides to surprise her by drawing up a piano for Terry to play. She ends up playing a beautiful and melodious tune on the piano, just as everyone watches. Meanwhile, Porcupine goes to a diner looking for Harold. She comes across the waiter who asks her to order something or leave, but Porcupine ends up causing a scene at the diner. She is being chased by the two police officers who have been after her since she escaped from the previous house after locating Harold and Moose. Gary praises Terry for her beautiful display, despite not witnessing it. He asks to speak privately to Harold and Moose, saying Terry should take Mel home. Just as Terry leaves, Gary goes on to tell Harold about Crockett Johnson after showing them the book Harold and the Purple Crayon. They are excited as Moose tries to go back inside the book, but nothing happens. Porcupine bumps into Harold and Moose right after Harold receives the good news. Unfortunately, the three friends' happy reunion is cut short when Porcupine is tackled to the ground by Silva, leading to their arrest. They are locked up in prison as Harold's crayon is being seized by the police, but the trio devise a plan to retrieve it. Together they are able to burst out of the prison cell. In school, Mel sees the trio from his window and quickly rushes to go meet them, but then he is stopped by his bullies. They take his whistle as they throw him off in the closet. Mel is locked in a closet, but then he suddenly remembers the crayon. He takes out the piece of crayon that Harold had previously broken off and given to him, and then uses it to bring his imaginary pet Carl to life. After Carl has burst out of the closet, he frightens the bullies as he assists Mel in leaving. Mel meets up with Harold, Moose, and Porcupine. He offers to take them to Johnson's house as Porcupine drives. Gary gets to see them. He is trying to get his hands on Harold's crayon, but then he fails to catch up with them when the group arrives at Johnson's home. They meet the caretaker, Ms. Barnaby. She tells them that Johnson has long since passed away and that the house is now a museum showcasing his artwork. When Terry finally shows up, having tracked Mel down, she reprimands Harold for interfering in their lives and turning things upside down. Harold becomes depressed and thinks the entire thing is a waste of time. Everything he has drawn, including Moose and Porcupine, starts to vanish as his spirits begin to wane. Harold is left on his own until Gary finds him again. Following a conversation, Harold is persuaded to give the crayon to Gary. Using the power of the crayon, Gary imprisons Harold. He tells Harold that he is coming for his revenge as nobody believes in him. Meanwhile, after realizing something is not right, Mel arrives to look for Harold. He sees him in chains and goes to rescue him, but he too becomes imprisoned. Gary creates a chariot as he heads into town to create his new world. On the other hand, Terry notices that her son is nowhere to be found, so she suspects he has gone to see Harold. Meanwhile, Harold feels like a failure, but Mel makes him see that he has brought joy to people's lives. He brings out the magic crayon Harold had given to him as he uses it to draw a key that releases them from the shackles. Harold tries to use his drawings as a weapon against Gary, but Gary is too powerful and manages to swallow Harold's crayon piece and uses it to his advantage. While Moose and Porcupine resurrect, Mel calls upon his imaginary pet Carl to assist in taking down Gary. He breathes out fire like a dragon and battles Gary. Just then, Carl diverts Gary's attention. Moose transforms once more and strikes the crayon out of Gary's stomach, taking away his power and everything he had built. Seeing that Gary is disappointed about not being accepted, Harold creates a door that lets Gary enter a reality that is identical to his fantasy world even with his Terry clone. Gary expresses gratitude to Harold, but then Carl destroys the door leading to the portal, making it impossible for Gary to come back. They all visit the Johnson Museum to learn about the creation of Harold's world. In response to Harold's question about why Johnson created him, Ms. Barnaby shows him a room where Johnson had left a special note for him to read at the appropriate time. Harold is urged to maintain his self-confidence and to allow his imagination to expand, hopefully motivating other children to follow suit. After saying farewell to Terry and Mel, Harold, Moose, and Porcupine went back to their world with crayons of various colors so they could continue creating their world. Thank you for watching, guys. If you love animation movies, please subscribe to this channel and keep watching. Bye.